Oh yeah, here we go, practice acquisition. There are pitfalls throughout the entire process. If you want to buy a practice, this is how, folks.
Acquisition Unscripted, the truth when buying and selling a dental practice. And now your host, Michael Dinsio.
All right, guys. Welcome. Another episode. Of course, I'm Mike Dinsio, co-founder of Next Level Consultants. And today we got a really special guest. I know everybody's special guest. Maybe a unique or an extra special guest. Someone I'm excited to introduce here in a minute. But before we get into that, let's just address the weird obvious that I am missing my beard. And for those that watch my program on YouTube, yes, this is Mike Dinsio. It looks strange. Let's just go with it. I'm doing a procedure and it required that I lose my beard, and it is November, to put a timestamp on. And Julian told me that, no shave November. I did the opposite, and I shaved during the no shave moment. So without further ado, I'm bringing in my friend Julian Cuello. I'm totally butchered that probably, but with Cain Watters and Associates, folks, you know this powerhouse in the industry. They are a firm that needs no introduction, but focuses a lot, of course, in the accounting and personal financial planning. And today I have this guy who interviews all new clients to the firm. So he gets a unique perspective of onboarding everybody. He's got an investing, I think, background and an accounting and background, of course, which is key to this role. But we got a unique perspective today with someone with Cain Watters. So Julian, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great to see you, even though I hardly recognized you when I jumped in the room with that beard. I was trying to think of the last time we ran into each other, and
randomly, by the way, randomly.
Oh my, how many things had to go right for us to find each other in downtown Dallas, midnight, on like a Friday night. Yes. None of us live in Dallas, for the record, right?
Yeah.
So it's awesome to see you again, man.
So you had this crazy like flight and thing, and it was just like this. You were going into this hotel that I happened to be staying at, and I was doing the trade show in Texas, and of course, having some fun with some friends, and there he was, just randomly. It's super cool to see on screen, though. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Excite guys who you've had on as well. I mean, the whole crowd was there. It was definitely some serendipity, but yeah, totally. Good to see you.
So tell us, like, for those that aren't familiar with Cain Watters, what are you guys all about, and what do you do for the organization? I said no introduction needed, but I'm sure there's some people out there that needs the introduction. So go for it. What are you guys all about? What do you give us the 30-second pitch?
Yeah. Cain Watters definitely needs a bit of a runway to explain, because when you think of Cain Watters, yes, big dental, quote unquote, dental CPA firm, right? Take care of just under 3,000 dental practice owners. But the draw to the firm is not so much that, hey, I need someone to produce a tax return, right? Because we can get that reliably in a lot of places. We work with a lot of great local CPAs. It's more so that, hey, I've outgrown my CPA, I've outgrown my attorney. I need something that's going to act more as a function of strategy as opposed to just straight up compliance, right? So our job is to really, be there as almost like a CFO in a way, when doctor owner is at a crossroads and they're trying to understand, how do I pursue this next leg of my career? Or how do I make, my personal finances really match up with where my practice is going? So advisors for hire, which is kind of the opposite of a local CPA, right? Usually consulting is like the add-on of any white collar firm, right? You go there for maybe tax prep, and consulting is the back end. Well, Cain Watters is the opposite. We hire folks with the intent of being advisors first, And then, tax prep and basic accounting might come after that. So CFOs for hire for lots of dental practices.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, no, I mean, I always say it like, anybody can tell you where your profit is or what your numbers look like. But it's what you do with that information is key. Like that's the world I live in consulting, where anybody says, hey, look, man, your wages are 40%. They really need to be high 20s. But how do you fix that? And that's the world I live in practice management, right? And you live on the other end, that once you get your wages down and you've got a little extra money in your pocket, then it's the what do you do next? So it's not the magic isn't in the number telling you the what, but it's really what you do with it once you hopefully executed it. Yeah.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. If we've got 40% staff cost, right? I mean, to what end, right? Is it really because you have the most amazing staff ever and you want to take care of them and they're all value additive? Or is it that you just have some really inefficient people on the team, right? And that's for someone like you to come in and say, hey, this is what's what. And for Cain Watters, I mean, there's no cookie cutter approach to analyzing a practice or a new client, right? Everyone's different. So it's, hey, first of all, establish what we're shooting for. And then are these incrementally increasing expenses actually getting us there in a straight line path and when we get up there otherwise, right? So like, to your point, consulting, it's so much more broad than just coming in and saying, reduce your staff costs by 50%, right? There's just a ton of nuance there. Yeah.
And I will say too, like there's definitely this there's this word in the industry, and even I use it sometimes, it's called the dental tax. You ever heard that? The dental tax. Anybody that does stuff for dentists, you can get thrown into this category of like, oh, they're more expensive because the dental tax, right? And so, and there absolutely is those scenarios. The reality though is you don't get to your size, Cain Watters, if you're just a dental taxer. You guys help your clients achieve their goals financially. It kind of starts at the accounting and goes up from there. And I love that. And so that is, these guys are not taxers in that way. They are on another level of advisory, and they don't just do the basics. So be careful of the dental taxers. There has to be something special about those people to earn a little extra. Otherwise, the local schmo that might not be dental specific could get the job done, actually. So you have to really ask yourself that, right?
Right. And yeah, so the first firm I worked out of college was just dental medical accounting, right? And it was a great place to learn. But at the end of the day, what we were doing was basic tax preparation. We knew the buzzwords of Benco and Shine, might have known what a crown was, but to our earlier point, like to what end, right? It was, if you want a successful accounting, bread and butter tax prep firm, just seemingly say you're dental specific and all your clients are great cash flowing clients. But for Cain Watters, it's hey, if we're going to know how many crowns we have to mill to break even on the SAREC or something like that, I mean, that is more than just a tax prepper, right? And that kind of advice might be more than a little bit, right? Than market. But if you have enough going on, that definitely makes sense to make that investment. So those are the conversations I have every day. Is, hey, is there enough complexity here that it makes sense to make this investment in a firm like Cain Watters?
Yeah. All right. Enough about how amazing you guys are, because you are amazing. Let's get into some meat. So this is an acquisition program. And I send a lot of clients to you guys. You've shared some with me. Thank you, by the way. It's because of the mutual respect we have in each other, and we've earned that. So let's get into some acquisition stuff. So when we're working through an acquisition, like how important is it to have somebody like you guys there to catch them when they get the keys for operation. Like I own now, and I've never been a business owner before, and it's all coming at me at once. I'm just trying, as the listener, I'm just trying to win over my team, and I'm just trying to win over the patients. Mm-hmm. And I need help with all this other business stuff. So that kind of leads the witness a little bit, but how important is it to have a firm like you guys help in that scenario and keep it to acquisition specific, because the startups go through different things, acquisition goes through different things, and established practice owner has other things, right? So how would you answer that?
Yeah. So, when you've acquired a practice, you've bought a lot of systems that are already pretty functional, right? I mean, you've bought the goodwill of the seller, you bought the staff, right? And a lot of things are already kind of on autopilot if you have a staff that really believes in you as a buyer, right? So it's pretty rare, honestly, where that buyer recognizes I need help beyond just producing, right, and making payroll and things like this. Mm-hmm. It's usually, quite honestly, Michael, not until that first tax bill where they realize that something is not going perfectly, right, or something is not going as well as it should have. I had a conversation immediately before this call, someone who's had the same CPA for the past 20 years since she bought the ortho practice, right? And still doing great dentistry, right? Great practice. It's just that no one, when you have a practice like that, no one really stops to tell you that, hey, this could be being done more efficiently, right? So, from where I sit, I mean, there's just so much being left on the table with tax strategy and optimizing your finances. But I don't think that quite honestly, the seller appreciates that until they get that first smack in the head, which is a tax bill, or they grow the practice to the point where they want to hire an associate and they realize, hey, I need help in actually getting the practice to a point where this makes financial sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some tools you use? What are some things you use to identify some of that stuff? I know, of course, any specialty is a little bit different, but how do you uncover? What's your process? How do you uncover those opportunities, those gold nuggets?
As far as just helping new kind of practice owners along the way.
Well, just finding that opportunity, like you said, you just get off the phone. Someone, someone was someone for 20 plus years as an accounting, and you uncovered some opportunity. What are some tools that you use, or some fun things that you do with your clients to find some of that opportunity for them?
Yeah, so it's kind of in two parts. I mean, one is kind of technical analysis, right? Like it's pretty rare where I talk to someone where I don't have a tax return on hand to see, hey, what work's been done and what can we add to the mix to actually, maximize some of this tax planning, right? And that can range from pretty simple tax strategy, adding kids to the payroll, running your primary residence, secondary residence back to yourself for 14 days, all the way up to very aggressive tax strategy, right? But honestly, that's the easier part. The harder part kind of falls into the second column of, where we find these nuggets, and it's optimizing their practice towards where they want their actual personal, like, accumulated wealth to go, right? Because going back to this previous conversation I had with this ortho, it wasn't so much that she wanted the tax planning as much as she really just wanted to cut back to 3 days a week in clinic, right? Mm-hmm. And, if the most proximate business person that you have to give you advice to tell you how to reach that goal as a CPA, they're producing tax returns, right? They're not going to be the best equipped to say, hey, let's look at new patient flow. When was the last time you raised fees? What is your case acceptance like? Let's dive into management software. Mm-hmm. Like it's really tough to get that out of them. It's like asking a hygienist to do surgery, right? It's just, it's really difficult. Yeah. So it's, just the technical analysis is really what we shine at, but the harder part is kind of making sure that any changes we make actually fit, practice owners' long-term goals.
That's awesome. I mean, you deserve the dental tax. That's as simple as that. when you're talking about case acceptance and you're talking about scheduling, you're talking about growth strategies, and it's not just, hey, your tax obligation this year is X. You're in another level of advisory. So that's that's super cool. Excuse me. What are some common things that you see for buyers when they buy a practice? And, you might get a tax return from the seller, but here a buyer is setting up a brand new entity and you get to start it over from scratch. Like, do you learn a lot from what the seller did and where you're taking your client, or like, what, I guess, where would you take that conversation? Like where's the greatest need for buyers in your opinion, new practice owners?
As far as trying to understand what's been done to the previous tax return as like evidence of what we might need to implement going forward.
Do you learn anything from the sellers before you head into a strategy for a buyer?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, first of all, from like a buyer's rep sense, right? I mean, if we take what we kind of just talked about and hey, we take what's working and we just forecast it forward, right?
Yeah.
It's only reasonable that, hey, staff is used to getting a 401k. We're going to continue with the 401k, right? Staff is used to having XYZ perks. We're going to do that, whatever it is, even down to the vendor level. So it's really, about giving the buyer confidence that, hey, this is what we call the firm your vision, right? Because we really try not to start with clients and solving a really short-term goal, right? Like your supplies. We try and step back and zoom out and say, where do you want to take this thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then when we talk about negotiating fees or dropping an insurance or something like that, that's just a function of reaching the greater vision, right? Mm-hmm. So I think buyers have to really be brave almost and say, hey, like it's okay to do things differently, right? Once we get down to the level of some of these things that affect goodwill, though, like branding, optimizing staff. I mean, that's some time where Cain Watters would call on someone like you to help with ops and training. Mm-hmm. But at the very least, it's really empowering the buyer that, hey, just because you're running out of a different corp or something like this, that you can really make this what you want it to be.
Yeah. I love what you said. Don't be afraid of some change. So let's break the mold, buddy, and you and me on this program. If you listen to any acquisition specialist out there, and maybe even me on some previous talks, don't change too much, but at the same time, change is okay. I love that you said that, because when you're looking at a practice and you're seeing some holes and some foundational issues, some major issues, maybe it's showing up in ARs, maybe it is the fee schedule, maybe it's the hygiene, maybe it's underdiagnosing. I mean, whatever it is, when you find some opportunity or some holes, you really do need to fill those foundational holes and fairly quickly. I mean, you can't be afraid of change in an acquisition, because you hear from everybody, don't change. But sometimes you have to change. Like it's do or die. It's you know what I mean? I find that all the time. Do you give that advice too?
Well, I mean, how many times have you, Mike, represented a buyer and, valuation isn't exactly where you want it to be, but things
every time. No, I'm joking.
Oh, really?
I'm joking. Yeah. Okay.
But to your point on change, right? It's, hey, they're referring out ortho or implants, right? Yeah. And this is a core competency that you as a clinician have, right? So, if we're able to accept that we can add things and change the practice at that level, right? As long as you have a team behind you that can back you up and say, like, yes, this is something that's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
is it really going to hurt you to change payroll providers, right? Something like
Right.
pretty simple,
Yeah.
especially if it saves you 1% overhead or something like this. So
Yeah, exactly. Mechanically, some of those decisions aren't as scary. Maybe getting new software. I mean, that's quite the overhaul. But if you're not digital, it could be an opportunity for you. That's another example. But I'm thinking of like lately I've been doing these small practices where they've been terribly managed and the new buyers taking them over. And my clients are like, oh my gosh, like I can't, are you sure I should make this change? Well, for, something as simple as like, hey, I think we need to cut days. And I know that's aggressive, but if it's a small practice, it's not thriving at all, you're getting it for a really good value. Maybe cutting days is a good idea, or if we find that a front office person isn't collecting as clean, but they have all the relationships, there's a strategy there. There's some certain things that are just foundational that you got to collect your money if you produce it. Like it's as simple as that. So
right.
Do you see that too?
Yeah, well, honestly, it's just a matter of making the most of your time, right? I mean, we don't want to get diminishing returns on our effort, and we see that all the time at Cain Watters. Often mature practices come to us at this inflection point where they're looking at adding that fifth day or the associate. That's a huge shift in lifestyle, right? And really, I mean, the conversation quickly becomes like we have to get away from this kind of hustle and maximize new patient flow, maximize dollars produced, and into like how do we do this more efficiently to maximize your time? Honestly,
yeah.
It's like it's a total paradigm shift, really.
So you guys are touching the fee schedule. We do a little bit of that. We do credentialing. We'll definitely analyze a fee, but in transitions, it's interesting, especially with the Delta situation. And you were talking about fee negotiations and stuff. Give me some things there. Like, what are you seeing in the fee world? Are you seeing people dropping fee schedules fairly quickly, or what's the strategy around fees? Like what are your clients talking about today with fees?
Yeah. So, I don't think any of our clients feel great about raising fees, right? But, let's be honest, staff costs are not going to come down, right? Inflation is what it is. We're heading very likely into, recession or something like this.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to raising fees, first of all, understand what's the greater picture here. How much are we out of network here? Because it's different per practice. The ability to raise fees right now and negotiate with the insurances not super great. I think for a lot of clients, the conversation unfolds to where we're talking about dropping insurance, right? So we have to talk about, okay, like to what end are we doing this, right? Like there needs to be a zoom out moment here. And just this is just something that needs to happen, right? And then, I think you have the client that feels a little bit bad about raising those fees. But like us as advisors, we just have to, put it back on them and say, hey, like you do great work, right? Like it puts your responsibility on the dentist to provide, a level of production that's worthy of this 10% increase fee or whatever it is. Right?
Everybody else is right now. Gas.
Yeah.
I mean, gas is just not coming down. I mean, we're time stamping this a little bit, but in the greater good of that, it's excellent point is like increasing fees is a normal thing. Like that should be part of everybody's business plan. And so many sellers haven't looked at their fees in 10 years. And what a great opportunity for the buyer to come in and maybe get higher fees than the seller, because they do look at the history of the seller when you're going through the credentialing, but increasing over time makes total sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's a point where it's almost irresponsible not to. Yeah. So
because wages are, you said wages are not going down. So how are you going to offset that? And ever since the pandemic, so many expenses went up and I haven't seen them come down. You guys publish a really cool report, which I think we should actually offer our listeners in the description below here, folks. Like, go download that, because I use it as a consultant nationally. How many did you say you represent? I mean, Dennis?
2,900.
I mean, can you think of an organization that has more data points than 2,900 in dental? And that report, why don't you talk about that report a little bit? Let's provide that below, though.
Yeah. So every year we go through our accounting clients and basically average out everyone's P&L, right? And we say, hey, for the average Cain Watters solo GP, two doctor GP, what does that top line look like? What are they netting from the practice, right? And we do every specialty, and then we have specialty reports for ortho and pedo as well. So you can kind of see, like, on a non-rural ortho practice, what are they paying chair side, right, or TC or something like that. And again, this is where the dental tax, right?
I was just about to say that anybody could use this report and call themselves dental accounting. These guys are publishing it. That's what I was saying, is that they deserve the dental tax. They're the ones providing all of the other accountants this information to benchmark. They're providing it for free. So anyway, sorry, little plug for you guys.
No. I mean, it is not a tiny effort to put together that report and make it actually, useful to practice owners, right? And internally, we have more, aggressive benchmarks that we use for every specialty, but at least gives you a sense of what's going on out there. And it's just, the firm's just different, right? I mean, during COVID, there were days where I talked to more CPAs and lawyers than I talked to dental owners, because they wanted to know what the world's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
definitely like
I think that's awesome. And that thing is my Bible sometimes when I'm in something that I haven't experienced personally. I've been in it for 15 plus years, and there's stuff that you guys get so granular with that. What are you seeing with wages? It's a hot topic, and I wanted to dig into that a little bit. You've seen them grow. Yeah. Like, tell us what is a GP looking at for wages these days nationally? And where was it? Give us some historical.
Yeah. So, GP's tough, right? Because there's so much diversity in the specialty, generally you're going to have that average practice that maybe around 23%, right? Of gross is what they're giving the staff. So it's really up to us to say, hey, as we grow, as we increase fees, I mean, how do we get creative about bonusing people out and adding them to retirement plan and things like that? As far as wages, it's actually something where we consider, overstaffing even for our practices, because again, like, anyone listening to this that has been a practice owner for longer than a year appreciates how difficult it is to recruit right now. And really just maybe even overstaffing as a matter of a contingency plan, right? To understand, hey, who knows what's going to happen in the next year. So, staff cost is one of those really tough things to walk back. So we have to really optimize on the margins. And you can get creative, like I said, you can do Visa gift cards and things like that. But I think anyone listening to the show thinks my market is different, right? And to a degree, it is, but just know that, I mean, across the board, I mean, it's going up, right? And the conversations we have with clients are more just about making sure those hygienists, those treatment coordinators who are actual value adds are really being taken care of.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed on your report is the percentage per the department. And I think that's next level, because if you look at overall wages, let's just say you said 23, again, hard to answer for the whole entire country and situations. But if you look at hygiene versus front versus, dental assistants, you guys break it down a little bit more even. And I think that's pretty cool, because when I'm doing my practice analysis, something like that, you can really see quickly, like, oh, front office is out of whack, or dental
Mhm.
assist. So you can sometimes get hidden in the overall number if you don't break it down.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you, basically. Thank you for giving me the breakdowns. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, Seattle's at $65 for a hygienist minimum right now.
Yeah.
Moment in time. Where are you guys on the East Coast or in Texas, say, where you guys are located ish?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's definitely more rural markets can go either way, right?
Yeah.
Either we're in like associate pay too, for example. I mean, we really have to pay to keep someone happy and keep them around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so 65 is high, but I always think, back to your point, the email you sent me the other day, it's how much is that hygienist actually producing, right?
Yeah.
Which is something I really appreciate about your group is we can't just take this cookie cutter benchmark and apply it across the board and call it a day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's we really need to know who is invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think folks clicking into the report, that's just like such a good read. And all specialties, like even if you're a GP, like look into the ortho report.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anything, you can appreciate the trend, right, of how things have changed year to year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely been a crazy 2 years, Mike. I mean,
It has.
it's
It
it's
has.
yeah, and things are still in flux now. I mean, yeah, like across the board for sure.
And it's not going to change until something happens with the market, getting it back to square one. I
Yeah, I think definitely so many people came off the back of COVID after not practicing, and felt like things were going great, right?
and then boom.
Um,
Yeah.
and then definitely nowadays, production collections are good, but there's sometimes where new patient flow isn't exactly matching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we're starting to come into perhaps a bit of a lull.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just being proactive, understanding, hey, what needs to be set aside such that if this does happen and your patients have less discretionary income, we're ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, you guys are kind of also a really good resource for me when I'm thinking about scaling to that second doctor. And you guys have a lot of big
Mm-hmm.
practices, and I always get the conversation with my clients about like, hey, the seller wants to stay on and work,
Mm-hmm.
and and I'm thinking the practice isn't big enough, but they're thinking, yeah, but they could mentor me and they can blah 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 blah. And listen, I'm not saying that it's not valuable to have a seller around. It in some cases it absolutely is. But how
Mm-hmm.
would you define, and I've got my number, I want to hear from you, how would you define a practice that's, and I know you can't be specific to one thing, and you've already said there's 100 different scenarios, variables, whatever, but in generically, just bracket here, how big does a practice need to be before you should consider a second person? I'm sure you get that question all the time. Like, what's that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're buying a practice and it's not big enough, you got to obviously pay the seller for production and time. And so it becomes a cash flow issue. What are your thoughts about all that?
Yeah, yeah, and thanks for the pre caveat there. Every practice is different. Um, you know, we, it's hard to not zoom out and to say to what end are we doing this? I mean, because if we are really keen on having that second doc and us both producing 4 days a week, $60,000-$80,000 a month, whatever it is, I mean, and we're at some kind of fee for service office, maybe in a rural area. I mean, we're looking at adding insurance or something like this, right? And all of a sudden, we're adding responsibilities to the office that weren't there before, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you really have to look long and hard at, hey, are we just adding, a second doctor's production for the sake of it? Or are we actually pursuing, some kind of market opportunity that's there that is a no-brainer to jump on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I love that. That's the answer, is you have to look at each and every situation. But I always have a bracket somewhere between 1.2 to 1.5. It almost doesn't make sense. almost.
It don't, it doesn't make sense to add the associate or
Yeah, just because because at the end of the day, 30% of that's going to be hygiene, right? And so you back that out. And but then again, of course, lifestyle and all that good stuff matters as well. Like if someone only wants to work 2 days a week, but you have to think about cash flow that the seller had with no debt at all, and has the wages that they have and the cash flow available to them. And then literally the day after transition, the seller is negotiating to stay on 3 days. And let's say the practice was open 5 days, but the new patient flow isn't there to support a doc. So essentially you're giving that seller all of the production. And then you're getting kind of the scraps in a lot of ways. And so it's you got to look at the production, and to your point, like where can you grow this practice and how do you support 2 docs? Historically, usually it's not the case. It's just been 1 doc deal. And then you got the loan that you got to pay for, the buyer does. So not only is the buyer getting the loan and having to service that debt, but then now you also have to support the seller's production. Practice just may not be big enough. And you got to think about that or you're going to be broke. Right. So
yeah. I mean, I'm sure seller workback is something that you talk about and buyers rep all the time. Right. So if you see, 3-day a week workback for 2 years, right? I mean, plus debt service and all this. I mean, I'm doing the same level of dentistry for how much, and taking this risk of a banknote for how much more in income, right?
yes, exactly.
Like the math just doesn't work out, right? So it's up to really savvy buyer's rep to say, hey, if that's non-negotiable, right? Then where's the extra value at? We're referring things out, right? Or something like this, is a small practice to begin with, what have you. Seller's workback is a tough one. I talk to a lot of soon-to-be buyers, and it's something they get excited about because, frankly, I think there's some aversion to being left alone.
Yeah,
like they're a bit afraid.
That's right. That's right.
So it's hey, again, like be brave. Like you got this. Like you're a former B of A guy, right? I mean, you can do the production. Like we've figured this out. You've got financing. So I think making that clear to buyers takes a bit of work on our end, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It can work. It's just be careful about what you put in writing. We talked to some attorneys on the program. I don't think we talked much about associate contracts. Maybe that's a good follow-up interview later on. But getting into an associate contract with the seller can be a challenging one if there's no cash flow. Exactly right. And I'm not an accountant, just a B of A ex-banker that I look at these things, but essentially you want to partner with folks that have the experience and look at these things on a level above just kind of telling you the what, not the hows and the whys behind it. I think that's where the value's at is above and below the what, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But as far as just getting back to the actual dollar amounts, I think if you look at that report, which everyone should go check out, average Cain Watters solo GP does around $1 million, right? Maybe netting 40%, with all the ad backs and all these things, right? So not including your debt service as a buyer, things like that. And that's about where you're working as hard as you want to. So it's like, okay, if I am going to have the seller on board, like let's recognize, what we're paying for that, but, associate some kind of value add that's not just financial, right? Like, hey, I'm going to feel much better in the next year or something like that. So as long as people know what they're paying for, then I think they appreciate that.
I think the buyers have a romantic idea of the seller hanging out. And I get that. It's safety, it's mentorship, it's all goodwill, it's all kinds of things.
Right.
It's just, it comes down to, I hate to say it, but I've going through as many transactions as I have. How do I say this without being, if someone just put this quote in a document, it would be so taken out of context. But I really hate to say this, but it's very true. After all these transitions, as long as the buyer comes in is nice and accommodating, not being abused, but you're a decent person, you're not doing anything crazy, you try to follow somewhat of what the seller did, but also trying to create your own, it's going to be fine. You're not going to lose all of these patients, and it's not so scary, and you probably don't need the seller. There's always a situation, but I had some practices that heck, my partner owned. We went through 6 dentists inside 2 years. The practice grew like crazy. It's just the conversations that you have with the patients and team are what matter. And hygiene, frankly, to me, almost has more goodwill than any of it, to be honest with you. So anyways, getting off the railroad here. Any final comments just on the acquisition vein? Thank you for being on and giving us access to that report. I mean, honestly, if you just did that, download the report, it's like so much value right there. But any last nuggets that you would throw into this conversation from an acquisition perspective?
So, I mean, if you're here listening to this and you're thinking about acquiring an office, I mean, just recognize that you're already so far ahead of everyone else, right? I mean, not only are you thinking about this, and I'm sure you're anxious, but you're actually seeking good advice, right? And I think, Mike, you've done a great job about bringing people on that have something useful to say. But I think at the end of the day, it's recognizing, hey, who's actually providing value, right? Like Cain Watters, even with consultants, where how do we recognize that this person is creating value over their fee? And buyer's rep can definitely be one of those no-brainers, right? Because you make that decision, hopefully only once to buy a practice, right? And on our end, which is basically like a CFO's, I mean, some of these things that didn't get ironed out during your buyer's experience are kind of chronic issues that pop up. You bought into a C Corp, or something happened, right? Your seller's workback was actually 2 years or something like this.
Yeah.
So I just want everyone who's listening to this to, first of all, appreciate, like, you're doing a great job. And I think financing being what it is now, just have some courage and recognize that if it's, the practice feels right, if it's in the right school district, if everything feels right, and net of debt service, you're still going to be taken care of, and the practice is going to be working for you. Like, practice ownership is the most wonderful thing, right? You get to be your own boss, run your own tax strategy, in the end, make way more money, definitely, being a practice owner than an associate. So I would just encourage everyone to keep on the track that they are and just connect with the right folks.
Well said, man. Pro ownership is a theme on the show. You echoed it. And thank you for thanking the audience, because you're right. I mean, it's so amazing that, like, the statistic of, like, if you have a DDS or a DMD behind your name, that 60% or something go into ownership for themselves. And here you and me, like, love business. I got my MBA, finally went into business for myself, not too long ago. But I bet you if you look at statistics of MBAs, like people that have MBA behind their name, and how many of those go into ownership versus DDS or DMD that go to ownership, it's probably, like, awesome. I always admire our clients because they don't have business training, but they go into business. And I think that's super cool. So those that haven't, I echo what he said, and that's get in. It's got huge upside, and get the right people around you that you trust and know what they're doing, that that will hold your hand through the process. So super awesome. Dude, thanks so much. It's always so good to see you. I am going to be putting all kinds of information below. How do folks get a hold of you if they wanted to?
Yeah, so cainwatters.com. You can go to our contact page and just put in a web form. If you email info@cainwatters.com, that comes to my team, and that'll find its way to me as well. And for anyone just wanting to talk things through, I mean, I would say 50% of the conversations I have with doctors is not necessarily saying that the Cain Watters is a fix for what ails them, right? It's just kind of talking through what's on their mind. I mean, we travel and talk at dozens of dental schools, residency programs, folks that aren't going to be in a position to hire us for 5, 6, 7 years, but really just we're happy to have those conversations, really. So info@cainwatters.com, cainwatters.com, contact form. Definitely check out the benchmark reports. If you think you're in a position to benefit from what we do, we've got a promo running to the end of the year for new clients, and we're always happy to chat.
It's awesome, man. Well, I think that tees us up for a shutdown here. Thank you so much for being a part of it, my friend. And folks, reach out. He just gave you the go ahead. Do it. You won't regret it. And I think you'll learn something every time you're on the phone with him. So thanks again for being a part of the program, brother. We'll talk soon.
Good to see you, Mike.
Tune in next time for another truth-filled episode of Acquisition Unscripted. We want to hear from you. Interact with your host, Michael Dinsio. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Comment and subscribe.